Once again, we're playing a conference game against a team that, and you'll probably get tired of me saying this, I'll probably say it every week, where physically, talent-wise, the two teams are as equal as they can be. The unique thing is traveling to Hawaii to play there. I think they have the same issues when they travel to the mainland. They're two different teams. When they play on the mainland, obviously they're not near as good as when they play at home. And they fight the travel issue the other way, obviously. They come to not only the West Coast, they go to Ohio State, they go to Wisconsin, they go to Idaho, against three really, really good teams, plus the travel problems that they have. They didn't play very well on the road. They play really well at home. They average almost, I think they average 37 or 38 points a game at home. They play much better defense at home. They beat a Pac-12 team at home the first game of the year, 28-20. They beat Colorado. So I see them as two different teams, how they perform on the road and how they perform at home. And obviously we're playing them at home, so we expect, since the talent level is equal, I would expect to see their home team, and I would expect to see a very close football game.
What is your thought process about traveling to Hawaii? I don't know if I read or somebody told me that when you were with New Mexico, you used to go to LA and then actually fly to Hawaii the day of the game from LA. Is that true? Mm-hmm. So you don't really want to be there too early?
No, I think that's the best way to do it. The league doesn't let you do that anymore.
That's right.
You have to be in the town 24 hours before game time, so the league does. Otherwise, we'd fly Saturday. We'd leave Saturday morning, get there in time to eat pregame meal, and go play the game. There's several advantages they have when they play at home. They're the same disadvantages we have playing over there that they have when they have to come to the mainland. I mean, you're losing time. The game starts at 9 o'clock your time. So, I don't know how many people are used to playing at midnight, but that's usually around the fourth quarter. When it gets critical, our guys are going to be playing by their time at midnight. Their guys will be playing at 9 o'clock, which most people their age really perform well between 9 and midnight.
I don't remember.
So that's a huge advantage to them. I think it's a real disadvantage to the team that's playing over there the next week, because by the time you get back at 8 o'clock the next morning, you're actually half a day or a whole day behind in preparation for your next game. So I think that hurts. I think what else hurts is, since you can't fly in the day of the game, you're there early enough to feel the atmosphere and the culture of Hawaii, which is really, really good if you're on vacation. Because the feel around there is everybody's on vacation. So I don't know about you, but I know how I am, and I know how the players are. If everybody else is on vacation, why am I not on vacation? And so it doesn't lend itself to the mental preparation to play. So there's a lot of disadvantages of playing over there, but they fight it 6 times a year, and you only fight it once every 2 years. So, I mean, they have to fight it all 6 times they come on the mainland. That's tough.
They seem to have some instability at quarterback, both because Whittick hasn't been all that great at times, and he looks like he might be a little nicked up now. You've seen Woolsey before. What do you think you're going to see?
Well, I think if like I have, if you watch the 2 games they played at home, the quarterbacks had no problems whatsoever. I mean, if you're going by statistics, you got to realize that they played on the road at Ohio State, who's #1 in the country, at Wisconsin, who is ranked in the top 20, and Boise State, who is by far the best team in our league. So statistically, they might not look like they've done well. Just take the 2 games, which we have done. Just take the 2 games they played at home and look at their statistics. They're pretty darn good. I don't know who in this country would be any good if they played Ohio State, Wisconsin, and Boise State, and they were anywhere from 5 hours on the plane to 8 hours on the plane, both ways. I mean, that's a tough deal. So I mean, the normal comparison between comparative scores and statistics, they're out the window. They don't count.
You talk about their schedule, Rocky. It's an evil necessity for them in many ways, isn't it? Because of the paydays that they're.
I think that's true of everybody in our league but one team. I think everybody in our league feels the obligation to their athletic departments to try to raise revenue, and that's one way to raise revenue. I think they made $2.5 million on those 2 trips. So that's one way you do it. That's why we played Penn State at Penn State. That's why you do it. And I think everybody in our league is in that situation because of our TV revenue, except for one team, because their TV revenue is a whole lot better than everybody else's in our league.
When you looked at the film, after the game this last Saturday, what did you see from your offensive line that stood out? I mean, in terms of the way they played against Fresno State.
I think.
The ability to run the ball the way you did.
I think they look like they did in the second half of Penn State. Their techniques and fundamentals were much, much better. They were much more aggressive. And the seams that they were giving the running backs in most cases were big enough for our running backs to make somebody miss. As long as they can do that, we got a chance. We got a chance to win some games. And Fresno was putting 10 guys in the box just like everybody else does too. It just happened that the seams were big enough that our running backs are good enough to make the one guy that's sitting there in the hole miss. Or up until the second half of Penn State and last week, those seams were so small there was no way to make the guy miss. And so they got tackled near the line of scrimmage.
Coach, you're talking about home and playing on the road and how it's much tougher over there. Are you aware of Maxwell Smith's record on the road as a starter, and is that a concern? Like, as a former quarterback, is that something that sticks in his head probably?
His record on the road is the same as our team's, right?
Well, no, his entire career.
Oh, his entire career. Oh, no, I'm not aware of that, and I don't need to know. Okay.
Rocky, the defensive line, when we talked the other night, you felt like it was their best game of the year. Can you break down that a little more as far as what you feel like they did?
I thought they completely controlled the line of scrimmage, which means it forced the opponent to use all 5 offensive linemen to try to block the 3 defensive linemen, or at most of the time we had a linebacker up there. So it took all 5 offensive linemen to try to block those 4 defensive linemen. So those linemen could not get up to the second level and get in the way of the linebackers. Okay, so it allowed the linebackers to attack the line of scrimmage without having to avoid offensive linemen. And so if the offensive lineman did come out to get the linebacker, the defensive lineman was in the backfield and ready to make the tackle. If the offensive lineman stayed on the defensive lineman, then the linebackers were free to make the tackle. It's a simple game. If it takes 5 to block 4, you've got an extra guy. And it's very, very difficult to run the ball. If they have to use 5 or 6 guys to block 4 guys, it's going to be a long night running the football. And that's what they did. They had to take their 5 guys and sometimes a tight end to block our 4 defensive linemen. And if they didn't, the defensive lineman made the tackle. It's a simple game.
The strengths of Sanchez and Barrett, can you talk a little bit about each of them?
They're both veteran players that know the scheme and know where they're supposed to be and where they fit. And they're not very big. They both play with great technique. They both play with great leverage, and they're strong enough to hold their own against much bigger guys. I thought that's the best game both of them have played.
That is a situation where, on paper, if another team or I mean, I even heard some comment at Penn State, these guys are tiny.
Mhm.
You know, on paper, it wouldn't look like they would match up necessarily very well.
Yeah, we do a lot of things on defense that most people don't. I mean, we don't make them two gap, if that makes sense to you. We don't make those guys take on an offensive lineman and tackle the ball carrier on both sides of the offensive lineman, which is two gapping. They're not responsible for two gaps. Very seldom do we play a shade defense where they are on one side of the offensive lineman and are responsible for that gap. If I was speaking at a clinic, most defensive coaches talk about gap control. We talk about gap cancellation. We throw people into gaps. We blitz, we stunt, we throw people into gaps. We don't control gaps. We try to control the gaps by throwing somebody in the gap. Okay, and that's defensive linemen, that's linebackers, and sometimes that's even safeties. We don't play a standard defense. Now, if we go running through those gaps and they block us, there's bigger holes too. There's more chance of them popping a long run, like happened, I think, in South Alabama. Okay, we take more chances to stop the running game than most people do because we don't have 290 and 300-pound defensive linemen. We got one 300-pounder. And we make him two gaps sometimes, or we try to make him two gaps sometimes.
So the function of not two gapping is the fact that they're not big enough to try to move either one way or another. They're
not big enough, and the guys would be trying to two gap are so much bigger than they are. Even though they're strong enough to hold themselves at the point of attack, they can't get off the guy to make the tackle. You know, I mean, they're getting blocked by anywhere from 300-pound to 350-pound guys. So all three of our defensive linemen are strong enough to hold those blockers off. They're just not strong enough and big enough to get off those blockers to make a tackle in a gap if you made them two gap.
So they're trying to hold up their blocker and get one gap if the guy goes to that one.
Mm-hmm. And then we stun them, so they line up in one gap and they stunt to another gap. And if they can take up two of the offensive linemen, which they were doing last week, if they can take up two of the offensive linemen, then the linebackers are free. If they slant over there and the two offensive linemen do not block them, Saturday they were good enough to be in that gap and making the tackle in the backfield. So it forces the other team to do one of two things: let the linebackers go free, or see if somebody can block those guys one-on-one. And every time they tried to block them one-on-one, they made the tackle in the backfield. Every time they had to use two offensive linemen on them, the linebackers were making the tackle. I mean, that's the perfect scenario now. That doesn't happen very often.
Takes special guys to do that role, though, right?
Yeah, and they have to be on top. They have to be on top of their game too. I mean, we do that every week. Other people have run the ball on us. I mean, we do it every week. So they were on top of their game.
Rocky, what impresses you the most about Chase Price?
His unselfishness. I mean, he's a good running back in his own right. In this day and age, when you're a pretty good player and you're not the starter, there's a lot of kids that say baloney and they transfer to some place they want to be or try to be the starter. It's more prevalent in skill positions than it is in other positions. So he's been unselfish the whole time he's been here. He gets several carries and all that, and when he's in there, he plays really good. I mean, he's a dependable guy. He knows what to do. He can protect on pass. He can run the ball well. He can pop long runs. He's just not quite as good as Pump. And he's an unselfish team guy.
But he also kind of brings you guys a different element too, doesn't he?
He does. I mean, they have different running styles, so they complement each other. You know? But I think more him being a team guy is more in this day and age. That's much more impressive than the two complementing styles.
But you've obviously got a lot of team guys at that position, a lot of guys who could say, baloney, I'm going someplace else.
The other ones are really young, so they're still thinking they're going to be the guy.
But nonetheless, I mean, there's a lot of adhesion there, obviously, that those guys are sticking together.
Yeah, I can't speak for other teams, but I have been an assistant coach on several other teams, and we have a very unselfish football team. In general, we have a very unselfish football team as compared to other places I've coached.
What did Maxwell do better Saturday night than perhaps he's done this season? At least, I mean, there was a couple of throws that he made, especially the touchdown to Eric, which was, that was a big league throw. I mean, there wasn't a big window to put that in, and he dropped it right in. And, I mean, did he have better footwork, confidence, protection, a little of everything? Or
Well, the one to Eric, he had much better protection. The one to Rashad was so wide open, and I agree. I heard what he said after the game. I agree. When you're a quarterback and a guy's that wide open, you get really nervous that you're going to miss him. But he put that one on the money too. But the one to Eric, he had plenty of time and did everything fundamentally correct and put the ball right on the money, because that was a tough throw. Eric wasn't that wide open. I mean, he was a step behind the guy, so that was a great throw. What you don't see is, since we were running the ball so much and having success, a lot of it has to do with him, because he's reading the defensive scheme, and if he needs to check the play, he's getting us in the right running play. You know, sometimes you call the right running play and you don't have to do it, but he checked a lot of the runs because of the way the defense was lined up, so that we were in the right running play with the right blocking scheme. Nobody sees that, right? And so he did that really well. We've got to get him, so we got to give him enough protection, which we're still struggling with. I think the offensive line blocked for the run much, much better, but our protection is inconsistent. And we've got to get him so he feels comfortable enough with the protection that he starts making some of those intermediate throws better. I mean, some of it's him, and some of it's because there's people around him and in his face and knocking him down. So we have to protect him better.